from the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg. This is a special edition of Inside Government with Cedric Peterson.
To our audience here at home and around the world, you are now Inside Government. We welcome you back to the series on fostering resilient crisis management. My guest in this edition of the series is none other than Mr. Raman Madan. He's the expert I'll be speaking to concerning the regional collaboration as it relates to fostering resilient crisis management. Mr. Madan, it's great to have you as a first-time guest inside government. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
First of all, let's start off, introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and your education, your background, your professional background.
Oh, really? Okay. So I was born British, actually. I was raised in Holland. And my parents are from India, so I'm kind of a multi-culti all-in-one, and worked for the Dutch government. I actually studied medicine, never practiced, and now I've been in crisis management for the past 20 plus years. I work now as a consultant, and I work all over the world, basically, wherever they will have me. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining me once again. Let's just jump right into it because we don't have much time. And before you know it, the segments are all over. Focusing in on fostering resilient crisis management, how would you define the concept of regional collaboration in context of fostering resilient crisis management?
Well, in any case, crisis management is based on network. Knowing people, knowing what they can do for you, what you can do for them. So in that way, the project touches the exact point on what crisis management is. And working on crisis management, you have to realize one thing: it's not a one-man show. It's not something one organization could do. It's not one country could do. And especially a country like St. Martin, where you're in the middle of the sea. You've got smaller islands around you. You have to be quite resilient, but you have to rely on yourself. And like I said, crisis management is not something you do yourself. You have to do with others. So in this case, the smaller incidents on the island, you'd probably use all the different departments and even private organizations and companies. But when it gets a bit bigger, you're going to have to look across the waves.
Absolutely. So I want you to highlight there, what are some of the key benefits of regional collaboration and crisis management compared to individual country efforts, as you indicated?
So it's in the beginning, if I tell you truthfully, you won't see the benefits right from the beginning. And why? Because people really want to see results right there and then. This is something you have to build, and it takes time. And the only time you actually see the results is when actually somebody is in dire need of help. So in a way, it's one of those unfortunate topics where you put a lot of effort in right from the beginning, and you only see the results once you're in dire need. That makes it complicated. It puts pressure on politics. It puts pressure on people prioritizing their day-to-day job. But the benefits are always at the end of the game.
Could you provide some examples, and especially coming out of your experience? You said 20 plus years of crisis management experience. Provide some examples of successful regional collaborations in crisis management and their outcomes.
Well, I'll take it a bit further. There's something called international assistance. And in that case, when countries, even, the richest countries in Europe or in Asia or the Middle East, Turkey was a good example recently. I mean, that's a pretty solid country, and still they could not handle the devastation, and reach the people that needed the help. You can't do this by yourself. So you need to have the assistance of your neighbors, or in this case, people from far beyond your neighbors. It's very simple. I mean, look at any devastating catastrophe in any area. You're going to need your neighbors. So, um, if you look at it from a preparedness point of view, there are lots of projects where there's only exercising and training, but you train together with other countries, other islands. Um, People do this right now all over the world. They're training on, search and rescue. A number of exercises just completed in Austria, in the Scandinavian countries. So countries from different countries participate in these exercises, and then when the actual occurrence appears, an earthquake, a tsunami, or whatever, these same countries actually provide the assistance at that time. Philippines was a nice example. Nepal is a nice example. It's not nice for those people, but at the time they needed the help, they got it.
What would you say are some of the common challenges or barriers that we can face as a small island developing state when trying to build regional collaboration for crisis management?
This is challenges. Every country has challenges, and I don't want to make it sound like St. Martin is any different. But every country has their challenges, and it's always priorities. It's always, like I said before, you have to put in a lot of effort in the beginning to see the results later on. You have to have that kind of vision, but you do need the resources to be able to do those kind of things. And that's a challenge that every nation has, even the richest nations, I must admit. But the smaller nations, the impact is larger. The island itself only has that many people. And I give this example to my international friends and colleagues. Normally, they have this assumption that if something happens, then a number of people are just not going to be able to function well. In this case, if you do that to an island with only a population of, 40, 60,000 people, that means a lot of people are just not going to be able to function. So you have to rely on international help. It's just not something one government or one country can do. So challenges, absolutely, but they're no different. The scale is just different.
Okay, you provided some insight there as it relates to my next question as to how countries can effectively overcome these challenges. And one of them, of course, you said is that the welcoming of the international assistance that is available.
Yeah.
Any other points of advice you can offer there as it relates to how we can effectively overcome these challenges? What would your advice be?
Well, there are a number of things, and it's very hard to, it's easy to provide these kind of suggestions. It's just really hard to arrange it or coordinate it because it just, again, costs resources. It costs not only money, but it's people. But there are a number. I mean, providing these, if you can provide this kind of help, if you have, I give this example, there are a number of countries in the world that have emergency medical teams, for example, or USAR, urban search and rescue facilities. You have these kind of teams. And when you go on a mission or you go on a training, you get so many new skills. You learn a lot of people, get to know a lot of people, and that experience you bring back home as well. And it's not only the skills, the technical skills, or the physical strain that you experience, but it's also the network you build. It's
Right.
also when you need help, it's easier to ask somebody you've actually met before, and to coordinate that help once they're on your island. If you meet them for the first time when you're again in dire need, and you have to get through it, it's really hard if you've never met them before.
Right, right. You mentioned a point there, especially when it comes to the politics, which caused me to ask you the question on what role does leadership play in promoting and sustaining regional collaboration and crisis management?
If I'm honest, it's difficult because I don't know your politics that well. But what I've seen from um, all the islands around here, they're very what's the English word? They're very um, sincere about trying to help their keeping their country, their islands safe, and they know the hurricanes are coming. So I truly believe they are very sincere in wanting to help. Um, I think they just also have the challenges of the day to day and balancing it with what may come. So, um, of course, leadership is very important. Um, it's just a challenge. It's basically, I always compare it to running a home. It's You have a certain kind of income, you're going to have to deal with it, and try doing that with all these kind of extra issues that you don't want these extra issues when they're not wanted.
Yeah. In your experience, what are some effective strategies for building trust and cooperation among countries in regional context?
What strategies to build?
Yeah, for building trust and cooperation, because some countries are very a little skeptical about allowing other countries to come in and assist, and of course having that trust because you have to build that at some point. So, in your experience, what are some effective strategies that we can use as a small island developing state in building trust and cooperation among countries in regional context?
So this is a very good question because this I can really truly say from my experience is doing as much as possible together with an open mind, with integrity and the willingness to learn from each other. So if you have a project or you have a training or an exercise, and you have the ability, I mean, the capability to um, invite others or go somewhere and participate in another exercise or on a project, that just builds so many bridges. The reward is so high. I can truly say this from my personal experience, and it's not such a big investment. And I'm not talking about money, but I'm talking about time. It is an investment. It always is, but it really pays out. It really does.
I'm having a conversation with Mr. Raman Madan. He is a crisis management expert, and we're talking about fostering resilient crisis management. This is the undertaking of St. Martin right now. We're having this conversation to examine the four pillars that make up the ability to foster resilient crisis management within St. Martin. My conversation with Mr. Madan continues right after these public service announcements. Stay with us. Hi, everyone. If you're just tuning in, you're part of Inside Government, our 10-part series on fostering resilient crisis management and undertaking of the government of St. Martin. And by extension, we're hoping that this information gets to you as a community and you can get some tips as to how you can take some of these types of strategies and incorporate them into your own family planning and, of course, disaster planning at home. I'm having a conversation with crisis management expert Mr. Raman Madan, and we are talking about regional collaboration as it relates to fostering resilient crisis management. We left off talking about the experience, Mr. Madan, that we can, foster out of getting, building effective strategies for building trust and cooperation. I would like to ask, how can countries balance the need for cooperation while still protecting their national interest during crisis management efforts?
That's not an easy question. I mean, that's a question that you'd have to ask the governments itself. But there is one thing I would like to point out, and this is where the public comes in. I truly believe that we as citizens of our own countries need to do more. It's like I said before. You can do so much, and if the public can actually help you, the workload is already a lot less than when you have to do everything yourself. And I give this example. When I give my lectures, I give this example of two catastrophes, two disasters, and I won't mention them, but just in the situation of disaster A, the population relied completely on the government to provide for them, to take care of the after effects, but also the response and the after effects of the disaster. And this was a flood. So I'll just give you some context. And it took the government, because this is a country that would rely on government, where they would all do their part, and you've never been really susceptible to real disasters, so you rely on the government. And this is what happened there, and it just took years before the effects were actually the effects were gone of that flood. In a different country on the other side of the world, a similar flood occurred, and the devastation was comparable, but it took only 3 months to actually get things back on their feet. And this was all due to the fact that in the first weeks after the devastation, the public actually, they knew, I mean, this could go on for months. They put their shoulders underneath it for the first few weeks and helped the governments to actually move forward. This just means that the economy just started after 3 months already. It picked up. In the other case, it took years before the economy started picking up. So I think the role of the public is very big, and it's not all big things. In this case, in the case that I was just describing, it's actually carrying water to the sea. And it sounds like a really bad proverb, but they actually did it that way. I mean, that's just giving you an example of where governments can do so much, but where does the public, what can the public actually do? Yeah.
What can they play? Yeah, their role. What are some of the best practices, would you say, for information sharing and coordination among countries, even among communities, like you indicated, being the primary focus that we should have, especially when fostering or building regional crisis management,
Right.
a framework for it? Information sharing. What was your over the 20 years of experience in this field have you seen as being effective? And especially now with all the modern technology, what would you say is the best practices
So I've been
should
to
look at?
places where they didn't have technology, and they got
Okay.
things done because they knew this is a very bad example, but they knew the brother of their wife's sister-in-law, who worked at a different department, and they could just call and say, listen, we need to get this done. That works. That works because people know who to call when they need it. So information sharing works only as far as if you actually know who does what, who can do what, who can do what when, because some people just can't do it at the spur of the moment. They need to prepare. So it's all about knowing your partners. It's all about finding the time to build bridges between these partners. And in my line of work, you do that often with trainings or workshops or theme sessions where you discuss a certain problem. You bring in everybody, you have coffee, you have a beer afterwards, not during, but afterwards, and you get to know each other. Information sharing when the crisis actually occurs, it works so much easier. Tools are great. And why are tools great? Because you need to sometimes find out, when did we make certain decisions? When did we really have the total picture of the situation? Who made that decision, by the way? That's all very interesting and very interesting for crisis management, because you want to learn from what you've done wrong. It's not a means for governments or politicians to blame game, but tools are great for that purpose during the crisis and afterwards, what you can learn from them. So information sharing is on different levels, and you really need to know each other, and then tools are great. Tools are great.
Yeah. I didn't want to rule out technology. I appreciate the fact that you mentioned the fact of countries that don't have access to any major technology, because that, of course, brings up the point of making sure that you have a balance and understanding that person to person, really knowing your people and your country and what they're capable of is very important. But can you discuss the role for countries that are technologically inclined? Um, the role of technology and data sharing in enhancing regional collaboration for crisis management?
I have to think about that one. The role, it's difficult to answer that question, because the purpose of information sharing always has to be helping, improving the situation. You mentioned a few things. I'm not as skilled as Kenny, but data and information are two different things. Once you've got your data, you can turn it into information, but it's it's necessary, because, like I said, you can't. If something happens on the island, you need to inform everyone immediately, and everybody needs to be alerted and understand the situation at the same time. If you have to share that information 10 times, that's just bad, a waste of your time. It could be possible that you can do this more efficiently through a technological appliances. The issue is, during disasters, it often occurs that you don't have that kind of means. I mean, internet could be out, telephones could be out. So you really need to know people. You need to be able to. I need to call you. I need to say, Cedric, I need you to start up the radio right now. This is the message, and you need to trust me at that moment, saying, okay, this is what I need to do. If I have to actually explain it to you, or you have to read it and then go through it, analyze it, judge it, or whatever, that takes so much time. So
Takes
um,
time.
it gets it's absolutely necessary. So I won't discard it. I'm not saying it's not needed or not necessary, but you need to get there first. And before you can get there, you need to base the base, the foundation, the right word. The foundation needs to be set first.
Good point. As it relates to the term that's been thrown around quite often, is it's the word sustainable. So that causes me to create the following question. How can regional collaboration be sustained over the long term, beyond the immediate crisis response phase? What would your take be on that?
That's not too hard. That it comes back to what I said before. If you start off with trainings, you start off with exchange of information. It could be exchanging information on weather alerts. It could be information on tidal waves, on seismic activity, anything that relates to you, and you are able to share without any, what's the word, without any prejudice. They don't need this, or they don't, it's not useful for them, or whatever. As long as you're open and you're transparent and you're willing to give and take, that's the basis. And if you want to make it sustainable, you have to build a relationship, and you build a relationship, by meeting them, by seeing them, by sharing and by caring, training together, exercising together. These are just simple tools to make sure that works when you need it.
Crisis management expert, Mr. Raman Madan. Mr. Madan, thank you so much. We've ran out of time for this edition of the program, and I want to thank you so much for being a part of this series to help us get some insight in regard to regional collaboration as it relates to our subject of fostering resilient crisis management. So thank you so much for being a part of this edition of
Thank you
Inside
very much
Government.
for having me.
And to our radio listeners, television viewers, online viewers, thank you for tuning in and being a part of our series, continuing to talk about fostering resilient crisis management. If you've missed my conversation with Mr. Madan, be sure to catch video on demand at the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin at facebook.com/SXMGOV. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Government of St. Martin. And for audio playback, tune into St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day. On behalf of my colleagues at VNG-i International, of course, the Government of St. Martin, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Cedric Peterson. See you in the next one.